to you, Thompson.
A very wonderful morning to you. Anna.
So good to be back here too.
Absolutely. And the headlines are not slowing down. Just recently we were talking about reforms in the education sector, and not too far from that, it has actually reached the judiciary, actually, talking about some senior lawyers and legal practitioners having to argue about how important the law school is to fresh graduating law students. You would want to answer that question in different ways and with different opinions. There are merits to it, and of course, definitely there will be demerits. And you know, for some law students who have struggled to get into the law school due to the financial burden, you know, that it entails, they will really be happy that this goes through. And for those who find it so easy, you know, due to the fact that they've got some level of financial stability from home, it wouldn't be a problem. I know of a friend who actually just left the law school, but he's been trying to do that for about 6 years until he finally got to do it last year, sponsored by a politician or something, after a lot of hard work and, you know, but it's not been easy for some of them. Right, you know, some of them, aside from paying that humongous amount of money to go get into the law school, you still have to sustain yourself out there. Some of them are farmed out to the north, some to the south, and it's not been that easy for people who are really struggling in terms of accommodation, feeding, transportation associated with law school. I mean, it's a huge one for them. And well, for some who are actually raring to go, no doubt there are some exceptional students out there who would really love to, you know, finish school and then get into the profession as soon as possible. That will hasten their entry into the profession. So for people like that, you will really be happy that this goes through. And also, there will be less academic stress, just like we mentioned. I mean, you know, once you are done with, you know, university, of course, just like every other profession, some other professions, it's quite easy for you to just get into the field and start doing. Just like someone that studied education. I mean, you need no extra coaching to get into the classroom and start teaching. So for them too, it will be a seamless arrangement. And this might actually help some Nigerian universities who feel like, well, let's just keep churning out fresh graduates in the law profession. And then, well, they still have the opportunity of going to the law school and brush up themselves when they get there. So this might actually help universities, you know, focus more on practical sessions rather than, you know, just a theoretical part of all of this, you know, which actually encourages some of the students to actually read to pass exams. I mean, some people like Bisola on the street will say, la cram la pour, you know, you just cram and then you go into the exam hall and just put it in there. But then that might not give you the best set of students because there's no practical, so to speak. But then if we now get to that stage where universities are given the sole responsibility of producing the best set of lawyers Nigeria is actually looking for, then you might actually say, oh, this will be a good one. And might also aid the congestion. The current system sometimes faces overcrowding and infrastructural challenge, especially in the law schools. Okay, if you look at the facilities in our law schools, is it adequate enough to take in the number of you know, law students that we're actually pushing there? It's a very big one. And just before I drop this, let's talk about how it can badly affect, you know, the law profession. This might actually affect the practical training that they go in there to learn. Okay, you must have been taught, oh, you must know the Nigerian Constitution from cover to cover. Some legal terms, yes, they get stuck to you. You know some precedences because you have gone through some cases from 60s, 70s, 80s, and then you are quite familiar with them. You know when you come across this particular case, you know which one to refer to for your precedents. But then the practical aspects might be a little bit difficult, and we might just, you know, have an epidemic of half-baked lawyers on our hand if care is not taken. And it might just lower the standard of the profession too. Because it's something that we need to talk about over and over again to see if truly Nigeria is ready for this kind of reforms you are seeing in the education sector. Recently, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu announced a 39-year-old to fill the void left by Professor Ishaq Oloyede at JAMB as JAMB registrar. Yeah, if you check his track record, it's been fantastic. In fact, he turned down the opportunity to stay back in the UK just because he felt like Nigeria is a much better habitat for him to actually work. And it's been so far so good. It's been fine for him, as at least he has gotten the kind of attention he deserves by being given the opportunity to lead JAMB. Can we have more fresh brains like that who can actually be pushed to do something really great, and then they will be ready to do it? It's one thing to go to school to study, it's another thing to be ready for that profession. And the law school provides that for all law students. If that is taken away, do we have a university standard in Nigeria that can actually produce a ready-to-go lawyer, so to speak? And that would be something we really need to talk about, Anu.
Yeah, I think something, where I would start from is where some have alluded that there's a problem on our hands that we are still trying to grapple with. Yeah. And so that's like the judicial credibility case. It's been ongoing for a long time. We've even on this table discussed how many cases we have pending, how many cases have not been heard in courts, and a lot of institutional dilapidation in that sense, to say we have a lot of cases, we have a lot of things we should have done in the judiciary that we are not able to do. For one, maybe infrastructural deficit, others as well, maybe human resources as well, quality and professionals in that field, and a lot more. So there are a lot of ways to look at this issue. But I think one of the conversations that is very important, especially at the time that we are now, is what's one thing you mentioned, and that's about the financial strain on people. At this economy that we have, I know how much it takes to go to a law school. I am not just even the accommodation, but even the tuition is not friendly with an average person who probably wants to sponsor himself, for example. Right. So if you have to study law, you have to have another bag, another bag to support you. Maybe it's a person, in terms of a person carrying the bag, or somebody sending the bag. Whatever the case is, you shall need a bag to carry along to law school. And it's very important. While it is also important to understand that if this becomes a thing in terms of like scrapping the law school, it might, like you mentioned, it might just in a way maybe put the sector into a substandard state in terms of quality, in terms of delivery. And why? For many reasons. One, some institutions do not have legal facility enough. And I'm talking about facility in terms of infrastructure, and also people who have the experience to train lawyers, to that end. Maybe what is going to happen if this is going to work is possibly some of those lecturers who have the experience at the law school can now be taken back to the university, because they are still the same persons who carry out the course. So they might need to train them at the university level. But how sure are we that that's going to work as well? Because some of them might not even want to. But of course, the people that are saying no to this are members of the council, the legal council, education legal council are the ones that are against this. And also the law school officials and workers are saying, no, this is not right. And a lot of persons have differing opinions about this. Well, I am one person that would not say if things does not work, we should still continue. I feel like if things are not working, or if they're not working as much as they should, then we can also change it. We can look out for, human beings can change. We are not trees in that sense. Trees even change, right? But human beings can, if I don't like my house, I can move away. I'm not a tree. I can decide to do one thing today, and maybe if it doesn't work, reform it and make it better and do something else tomorrow. And that's a good way to look at it, to say, can the Nigerian Law School be scrapped? My problem is, even if it's not now, someday, somehow it's going to be scrapped. That's very certain. But is this the right time? It's another question. But I think it is, in a sense, because the way I see it is, one, the financial strain that we've discussed, it's easy to just say it from afar. And you mentioned, we don't have law schools in every state. We have it just in few states. So if you have to, you understand the situation as well, the security situation in the country, if you have to travel from the southwest maybe to the north, to go to the law school, and that's also a strain, not just the strain of finances, but also the strain and the risk that you might be, whatever the case is. But I'm just trying to say that we have to look at the situations that we have at hand to see what should we do. But one of the cases that was really mentioned was the fact that the standards in the UK, the US, and some other places are the things we want to adopt, because so the people that are proposing this, they said other countries of the world, developed nations, have decided to move from where we were, and they are doing something else. But I want to say that yes, it's okay to think that way. In fact, I totally agree with that. But what I really would not agree with is if we have to do things hook, line, and sinker without considering the relative situation, or should we say the pertinent situation to our economy or to our country, so that's something to look at. If I want to take something from the US, for example, I have to look at the underlying factors in my country. How can I make it work in this environment? Because environments are peculiar. So what is endemic to them might not be endemic to me. What is obtainable to the US might not be obtainable to Nigeria. And so we have a lot of cases to settle in that sense, to say, can we make it aligned to what's the goals of this country or what we need? One, we understand the cases of having prolonged cases in court, having maybe some have said, because that's also linked to the fact that we're not having quality or qualified personnel handle cases in a lot of ways. So all of that are the things we're trying to look at. So if Nigeria has a lot of deficit in that structure, and then we can look out for something that can make it work. But will this tackle those problems directly? Is one of the conversations. To say, if universities now run maybe a 7-year system, to say 5 years for the course, 1 year for internship, and another year for one other training or whatever, to try to get to that point. So I'm saying it makes a lot of sense to think about it if it will address the pertinent challenges we have in the judiciary sector. But if it will not, then I'm afraid this might not really stand. But I'm not sitting on the fence, and I'm also sitting on the fence because I'm not a legal person. So, but with the things we have been provided with, the information we have at hand, I can say that there, like you mentioned, there are merits to this and there are demerits to it as well. But looking at it expressly and comprehensively is what we should do, instead of just saying, because I don't want to lose my job, because I don't want to leave the law school as a teacher. Let's look out for what will help the country better, what is more likely to progress us in terms of all of that. But the structure which they claim is a problem, understand that we've seen this from the university law degree that you have, LLB, then you move from there to the Nigerian Law School, and then from law school you'll be called to bar. And that's also a conversation to say the process, maybe it's a bit bureaucratic, it's a bit long, it's a bottleneck kind of. So can we have it maybe just straightforward? Because it will mean that we have faster lawyers becoming lawyers now, faster students becoming lawyers in that sense. To say if they just run through the education system, because some people, like you mentioned, finish from a Nigerian university and they don't go to the law school in 1, 2, 3 years for some reason. And you understand this is also a thing to consider. So for somebody who's just going to run through a 7-year course in the university, that's going to be that makes it faster for them. And like you also mentioned, maybe the financial strain will also be reduced. Those are the benefits for the people who probably will be saying, let's have this, let's have that. But of course, let's also, maybe they'll just bring it back to what it was before. I remember, I think in 1962 was when this was designed. And it was designed because we had just a few universities and low law degree aspirants in that sense. To say students are not really enrolling at the time. But today the environment has radically changed. Everything has changed because we now have more students. And I was looking at, according to the recent Council of Legal Education expansions, more universities have been approved to run law programs, while admission quotas continue to rise. So in 1990s, the estimate was that the number of law faculties we have in this country was below 20 in 1990. But now we have over 70% accredited or approved law faculties across the country. And that's a development to say, okay, maybe that was why they created it that time in 1962. Perhaps because we now have something better, maybe we can also upgrade. Maybe this is an upgrade in that sense. Also, the annual law graduates in 1990, the estimate is about a few thousands, but now we have tens of thousands graduating from the law school almost every year. So we understand that's also a conversation, right? The central law school system then was a bit manageable because we don't have as much people as we have now. So now it's congested. We're talking about the backlog of cases that are undetermined, that are not heard, that are still pending, a lot of court cases, and that's not even good for the judicial system. We understand some persons have been inside wherever they were remanded in for a longer period than they should. And that's also telling on the integrity of the nation. So if I can't trust the judicial system, for example, and we also say that there's politics in all of these things too, because some lawyers have now, I don't want to say sold their soul to the devil in this sense, but they sold their soul to politics. So many of them would not even do normal litigation, criminal litigation, or what they do is look for politicians. I want to be in your bank, I want to support you, I want to be in your on your track to help you do one or two. And so it kind of like brings down the competence level, or should we say, because when politics is coming, money is changing hands, and a lot of things are happening behind the scenes that might erode credibility in that system, in the legal system. And that's one of the conversations we have. But again, overcrowding in law school campuses is what is likely to happen if this expansion if this expansion comes to play. It might have many more people now. The university might not have that much because you understand that polytechnics don't offer law degrees. Yeah. So that's also one. So that means universities are going to do more than they have done. But the NBA president, just before I finish up my point, was Alpha Mosigwe, was acknowledging that the increasing number of graduates and law school admission institutions may force systemic reform. So in fact, he mentioned himself that there's a chance for a reform. And I think it is a laudable thing if they are thinking in that direction to say, is there a need for this reform? And will it address the challenges we are currently faced with in the country, in the legal and the judiciary system? If yes, then go ahead. If no, perhaps you might want to take another.
Well, I will pick up from where you stopped. For students who have had to suffer the cases of ASU strike and some other things, they would really be glad that this is about to be done, because it cost you 5 years to get your LLB in law, and a year at the Nigerian Law School. That's not to talk about youth service in some cases, or except for those who got exemption letters. And it's not really looking good for some of these students. Well, since this administration came on board, they've been able to minimize, or reduce to the bare minimum the issues with ASU, and they've been able to fulfill a few of their promises, except for a few days ago when ASU said they were going to go on industrial action because some of these promises have not been met. And a few days later, we are not hearing anything. It means that they must have been called to the table. And if there's anything this administration has been able to do, is to make sure that there is a level of consistency in the Nigerian institutions. No strike, no breakage, no disruption of educational calendar and some other things like that. That for me is kudos to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. At least this administration has been able to do that. And talking about NEL Fund, some people have been able to benefit from that. You remember the case of the young guy who came out with first class and said, a big thank you to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu for introducing NEL Fund. If not for that, he would probably be out of school by now. Some people have benefited immensely from that. And some people have also talked about the bottlenecks and the bureaucracy surrounding how to get NEL Fund. And I would implore them to read more and, of course, ask questions from people who are already benefiting from that, because I don't think the government has a benchmark on how many students will get that on a yearly basis or per semester. There's no benchmark. So as long as you have what it takes, you have the requirements, you can easily get the loan. That is for the Nigerian students. But then, if you look at the issue of a law school in the country, I will still go back to the fact that they do not have adequate facilities. And in Nigeria, we have about 14 campuses with the headquarters in Abuja. There's Lagos, Enugu, Kano, Yola, Yenoga, that is Bayelsa, Port Harcourt, Jos, Kaba, Maiduguri, Okija, Orogun, and Argungu, and Ilawa Ekiti. These are the 14 campuses we have. And I can say for a fact that maybe Abuja, Lagos, and to sort of make sense, Enugu and Kano, you would say, oh, probably have, the best facilities. The rest, you would really struggle to survive there, according to experiences of some people who have gone to the law school. And that is when those places were not even overcrowded. And now that it has been overcrowded, that's a problem. And we are not even talking about people who, probably studied maybe English, they've been working successfully in some places, and then after a few years they feel like, well, maybe I should study law. And these are adults who are married, and they have children of their own, and then they've had to go to law school. You can imagine what they will be facing in there. You cannot stay in the hostel facilities. That is even if any is provided. And then the cost of now getting an apartment of your own when you are already paying for an apartment where your family stays, wherever it is. And it's similar to NYSC. You are not even sure you'll be posted to a place of your choice. You might just be sent out of sight just because you want to go to the law school. This might just help them, provided we can restructure the university education system to accommodate this kind of change. Otherwise, we'll have a lot to deal with in the next few years. And, if you now have below par lawyers being churned out from universities, it means that we have a crisis on our hand in the future, because these are people who would eventually become judges in different courts. And if you now have someone who really does not have what it takes to be on that seat, then there will be a problem. You just spoke about the judiciary credibility in the country, and we are still grappling with that across the country. You see a particular judge giving a judgment on one case, giving something different, and then another judge on the same case, something different entirely. And you begin to wonder, how did you interpret this particular case? Where did you get your precedences from? If there are no precedences, was it discretion? And if it was discretion, are we truly on the right path with the kind of judgment we are getting? And then we have seen situations where there's a judgment pronounced in court and the CTC is quite different from what the judge actually pronounced in court. What changed between when the judgment was pronounced and then when the CTC was released? What actually was the difference? So we need to start looking at that area. And if we are going towards that direction, we need to start working on it right now. Otherwise, it might just get worse in the future. So to sanitize that industry, a lot of work really has to be done. And while I was doing a little bit of research, I got to discover that even countries where we borrowed our democracy and some of our education structures from, like the United States, our students attend professional law programs, which is a Juris Doctor degree within the universities, not anywhere outside the university. And after graduation, they write bar exams directly, and there is no separate nationwide law school after university. Same for Canada. Law graduates usually proceed to articling practical workplace training, bar examinations afterwards. Professional training is integrated differently from Nigerian centralized, law schools. So while you are still in the university, you get hands-on practical experiences,
hands-on practical experiences,
experiences in the school, and then by the time you are done, you are fully ready to take on that mantle and, of course, do what is expected of you. Even in Germany, legal training combines university study with state examinations and practical apprenticeship while in school. And then there is no separate, just like what we said about America, South Africa, Uganda, even the UK and Kenya, there's something like that where thorough bar and vocational courses are done within the school system and not anywhere separate from the structure of the university. So it won't be a new thing to do the same thing in Nigeria. But the only problem is, do we have the political will to get things done the right way? Not about just doing it. Do we have the will to do it the right way? Are we going to put all the necessary infrastructures in place to make sure that we do not regret taking this decision in the first place? You remember in Nigeria we have introduced policies that we have had to change over time. I could remember during the regime of President Muhammadu Buhari that time, a few policies will be introduced, and then maybe a week or a few days later it will be withdrawn, and then we want to work on that policy and make sure that we don't want to go through that phase in the education sector, because it's one area that needs 100% attention. This is where we produced all the professionals, and as long as that sector of the country is working perfectly, we are going to have competent professionals filling positions across the country. Until that is done, we are still going to have this kind of epidemic we have on our hands. Recently, someone mentioned, a CEO of a company said, there are about 500 openings in his company, and then he does not think he has seen Nigerians capable of filling those positions, that some of them are not even employable. You would want to disagree with him. But deep down, if you ask yourself these questions, you have spoken to some people who are fresh graduates, and you know deep down that some of them really do not have this stuff expected of them. And some of them will have to even learn on the job. We have seen companies who employ, and then they will still have to train you for what you've been actually employed to do. It's not bad when you do training and retraining in an establishment, but when you have to be trained from scratch to do what you said you studied in school, then there is a challenge that we have to face. Otherwise, I don't see where we are going.
It's a serious case, you know, but I would just say, like you mentioned too, sometimes in Nigeria, what we do is we want to build a house, and the next thing we do is get a roofing sheet. So we forget that there's a foundation. Other times we don't even make foundation, we just build on it to lintel, and then we have the roof over it, and eventually something will collapse someday, and that's where we now say, oh, I think we need to reform this. So why did we not think about the possibility, or should we just say, when we have policies, can we have something called probationary period for policies, to say we are going to test run this thing. If it doesn't work within this year and this year and this year, there's a new reform that might come to play.
Well, policies, every policy has incubation period.
But okay, we don't get to see it in reality.
It is not expected to, start today and start clicking. Okay, even if an administration introduces a policy, they are given a time frame. Okay, let's do this in 2 years, and after 2 years, we'll have some reforms. Yeah, but then in Nigeria, we are quick to, because Nigerian leaders react, right? They don't really act on things; they react to issues. So when you introduce a policy and then there is backlash out there, you are not thinking of the greater good, you are thinking of what they are saying, and then you withdraw that policy. It might be difficult for you to bring the same policy out again. You might just have to throw it in the bin and then look for something else to do. So it's a challenge for the government in Nigeria to, one, look at these policies holistically before you put them out there. Are they realistic in Nigeria? Because just like you mentioned, peculiarities do matter. We are in Nigeria. What works in the US might not necessarily function in Nigeria, because these are two different spaces with different people. And for a Nigerian state that has different languages, tribes, religions, we must really be careful how we put policies out there. Does it suit everyone? Or do we have to adjust because of a particular culture or group? And also, if you look at the economic peculiarities in Nigeria, is it going to suit our economy? So we must think of that before we put them out there. We don't start adjusting policies. I mean, if you have a policy and then the success rate is just about 30 to 40%, you have done a very bad job as a policymaker. But then if you have introduced a policy that is above the average mark, maybe you are doing 55, 60, then you know you might just, no policy is 100%.
Yeah, it can be improved.
It can be improved. So you know that, oh, you just have to do about 15 to 60 to 20% improvement, and then you can say, well, we have something that is working in the country. Further improvements will be made in the future, but at least you know you have done a very good job. But then in Nigeria, it's always below average, and well, it's a confident point.
So before we take it away, let me just say this one more, because I know one of the issues we have is inconsistency in government. You know, we have one administration rule today, and then the next administration will forget, almost maybe intentionally, that there is a policy that has been working. They don't care. They want to do things.
That's because nobody wants to give accolade to anyone.
To anybody that has done. So you see a lot of projects that have been. So we see countries, developed nations, you know, they have projects of 100 years, 50 years, and they eventually get it on.
And it has to be continued. I was watching very quickly Reno Omokri yesterday, and said, look, what was the point? Okay, someone introduced a project of billions of US dollars, and it's already ongoing. And because you think we are wasting money, you think the next administration should not borrow to finish that project. So what's the good in leaving a project abandoned because you think, oh, we want to borrow? Every reasonable administration will borrow. But the question you must ask that administration is, if you benchmark what you are borrowing against what you are seeing as results in terms of infrastructure and, and stability in the economy and development across the country, is it worth it? Are we borrowing to spend? Are we borrowing to pay salaries? Or we are borrowing to invest in the country to attract investors in the future? That's one question you have to ask your administration. And so far, in Nigeria, we are seeing some infrastructural developments across the country. Look at the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Highway and some other highway projects in the country. They are linking one region to the other. They are linking geopolitical zones to another. That, for me, is one way of easing business interactions with these regions. If that is done, you are reducing business problems in the country by maybe about 30 to 40%. What other things you need to look at is the electricity. If you fix that too, you have done about 35% of that too. Then create an enabling environment by making sure that there's security of lives and properties. Investors will be sure that their lives are safe in your country. And that solves another 20%. The rest is to give them opportunity to get loans. Okay, if you are getting loans and then you don't have to, pay through your nose, then you know that, yes, you have a stable system working in your country. Otherwise, well, we'll continue to rigmarole just like we've been doing. Away from there, let's take weather report on the show this morning.